Syrian Arab army units set free our TV crew besieged by terrorists inside their Atiyah hospital in Damascus countryside. A number of soldiers and army officers forced to flee their military service surrender to authorities taking advantage of Presidential Decree number 70. Syria's permanent UN representative Bashar al-Jaafari stressed that Syria is combating terrorism on behalf of the whole world. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Yarado Krikorian with the news in English. The Syrian Arab army was able to lift the siege imposed on the television crew members inside their Atiyah hospital in Damascus countryside. Our colleague Jaafar Ahmed, who was among the besieged journalists, said that the terrorists, two of them from Saudi Arabia, infiltrated into the hospital and occupied the first floor of the hospital since 5 o'clock in the morning. 4 gunmen wearing explosive belts tried to break into the main entrance of the hospital after they blew it up, but army units intercepted them. The attack started when a terrorist group detonated a booby-trapped minibus near an army barricade near the Atiyah main entrance as the 4 suicide gunmen began to open fire on the hospital and managed to occupy the first floor, but the army interfered after intense clashes with the terrorists and managed to set the TV crew free, killing all the attackers. Our news correspondent Jaafar Ahmed yesterday monitored the situation in Qara and how the Syrian Arab army restored security there. He talked about the inhabitants' support for the army during the latter's operations to eliminate the terrorists who had wreaked havoc in the town and tried to target Damascus Homs highway to obstruct traffic. The Syrian Arab Army General Command said this achievement was a new success to be added to those realized by the Syrian armed forces in their battle against terrorism. The command added that this would tighten control on the lines of supplies extending along the borders with Lebanon and would close the eastern gate of Al-Qalamun in the direction of the central region and limit the infiltration of terrorists and the smuggling of weapons. In Damascus countryside, an army unit targeted a terrorist group in Yabrud city near the sport club and Al-Mallouhi Hill, in addition to targeting areas in Rima Farms and Al-Ghanam Souk in Al-Nabak city, as well as eliminating dozens of them in Al-Manhal Square in Dar Atiyah. In Homs city, units of the Syrian Arab army foiled armed terrorist groups' attempts to infiltrate from Lebanon into Homs countryside, inflicting heavy losses upon them across Al-Haswani, Al-Mathoume and Al-Qa sites in Homs countryside, while the others fled back into Lebanon. Terrorist gatherings and hideouts were destroyed with all weapons and ammunition inside them in Azara Grove, Al-Khalidiyya, Al-Ghasbiyya, Al-Amiriyya and Talbisa, killing and injuring a number of terrorists. Meanwhile, a number of citizens were injured in terrorist attacks by mortar shells on Al-Ashrafiyya village in Talbisa countryside. The Syrian Arab army units have killed and wounded several terrorists in a number of Daraa towns and villages. The army eliminated terrorists and destroyed their hideouts and tools in Ghadir al-Bustan. The army also killed 15 terrorists and injured others in Tal Jumu'ah on Nawat Sil Road. An army unit killed all the members of a terrorist group in Sheikh Miskin. Other army units destroyed weapons, warehouses and vehicles and killed several terrorists, including 4 snipers in Atman and al-Mayadin. Syrian army units also clashed with terrorists on Sadd al-Mukhayyam road and near Daraa National Hospital, eliminating a large number of them. In Enkhel, an army unit intercepted a terrorist attempt to attack a military checkpoint east of the city, killing most of them. In Idlib, 40 people who were forced by circumstances to flee their military service surrendered to competent authorities taking advantage of the Presidential Decree number 70. They stressed that they were treated well by authorities, adding that the victories achieved by the Syrian Arab army encouraged them to return and perform their duty of defending the homeland. Benefiting from Decree number 70, a number of army officers and soldiers forced to flee their military service surrendered to authorities in Al-Hasaka after they pledged to join the army units in defense of the homeland. Major Colonel Hasib al-Tahan, commander of police force in Al-Hasaka, stressed that a great number of those who returned to their military service have been forced to flee their posts because of terrorist threats to them and their families. Welcome back. Syria's permanent representative to the UN, Dr. Bashar al-Jaafari, has held the Saudi, Qatari and Turkish regimes fully responsible for the ongoing terrorist acts which targeted civilians, army personnel and infrastructure in Syria. He said the Syrian government was fighting the terrorism of the Takfiri groups on behalf of the world. Delivering Syria's statement during the meeting of the Third Committee, the Social, Humanitarian and Cultural Committee at the UN General Assembly, before voting on the draft resolution presented by Saudi Arabia against Syria under the title "The Situation of Human Rights in the Syrian Arab Republic," al-Jaafari expressed strong regret over the attempt by certain delegations to take advantage of the Third Committee's work repeatedly to serve their own political ends that contravened the provisions of the UN Charter and international law. Al-Jaafari said the Saudi regime was the last side entitled to talk about human rights in view of its black record in this respect. Al-Jaafari pointed out that numerous reports confirmed the Saudi regime's involvement in sending tens of thousands of Takfiri mercenaries from more than 83 countries to Syria. He called on all member countries to vote against the draft resolution and against Saudi intervention, as well as the intervention of other sides into Syria's internal affairs, affirming that such states knew nothing about human rights. Syria's permanent representative to the UN also delivered another statement at the Third Committee after voting on the resolution in which he stressed Syria's stand that condemned the use of chemical weapons, pointing out that Syria held the Saudi and Qatari regimes responsible for sending such weapons to the armed terrorist groups. On his part, Iran's representative criticized the Saudi draft resolution, describing it as contravening the efforts exerted at the world level to reach a peaceful solution in Syria and opposing all the UN Charter's principles. Iran's representative called for an end to the terrorist group's violations and to violence in Syria and for supporting a peaceful political dialogue. Russia's representative, on the other hand, said such draft resolutions on human rights cases in certain countries aimed at exercising pressure on certain governments and creating an atmosphere of skepticism and incredibility at the General Assembly, particularly regarding the crisis in Syria at a time when efforts should be exerted by the world community to reach a peaceful solution. The Russian representative referred to the Russian-American initiative, which should be unconditionally supported by all sides, calling for the beginning of dialogue among the Syrians and effectively working to end the transitional operation, which is based on the Geneva Statement. Russia's representative also criticized the Saudi draft resolution for holding the Syrian government fully responsible for the present situation, affirming the responsibility of the opposition, urging the latter to start dialogue with the Syrian government. China's representative, on his part, called on the parties concerned with the crisis in Syria to take effective measures to solve it peacefully. Brazil's representative expressed his country's regret that the draft resolution included no reference to the halt of any military action. He condemned the ongoing influx of weapons into Syria and the unilateral measures imposed by certain countries on Syria. Before voting on the draft resolution, the representatives of Nicaragua, Ecuador, Democratic Korea, Belarus and Venezuela had underlined the principles of the non-aligned movement, affirming their rejection of the politicized resolutions related to human rights cases in certain countries. 13 states voted against the resolution, namely Russia, China, Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Belarus, Zimbabwe, Uzbekistan, Iran, Democratic Korea, Bolivia and Ecuador, in addition to Syria. 46 states abstained and 123 were in favor of the resolution, including the USA, Israel, Turkey, Saudi Arabia and Qatar. During his meeting with Mr. Yaqub al-Hulu, the UN resident coordinator and the coordinator for humanitarian affairs in Syria, today The Foreign and Expatriates Assistant Foreign Minister Hussam al-Din Allah asserted the Syrian government's commitment to fully cooperate with the United Nations in meeting the basic needs of Syrian citizens and facilitating the access of humanitarian assistance to all provinces as well as across the official borders with neighboring countries. Mr. Allah reviewed the measures taken by the Syrian government to facilitate the work of international organizations, referring to the existing cooperation in the humanitarian field. On his part, Al-Hulu extended his deep thanks for the cooperation and facilities received by the UN to transfer the humanitarian assistance to all districts. In Iraq, a wave of terrorist attacks kills at least 24 people and injures dozens in Baghdad today. Security sources said that in Karrada neighborhood, a car bomb exploded, killing 2 people and wounding 6 others. The sources added that the deadliest attack was in the central Sadriya neighborhood, where a parked car bomb went off at an outdoor market, killing 5 people and wounding 15. Other attacks took place in Shab, Topji, Azamiye and Emil neighborhoods. Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki stressed his country's determination to combat the terrorists affiliated with Al-Qaeda terrorist organization, adding during the opening of a power station in Wasit city that despite the difficult circumstances in Iraq, the country will go ahead in building the economic infrastructure and fulfilling the aspirations of the Iraqi people in an economically stronger and socially more unified country. In Egypt, 10 soldiers were killed and scores injured following a terrorist car bomb explosion which targeted a military convoy on Al Arish highway north of Sinai. Egyptian sources pointed out that as the military convoy was passing by, carrying soldiers in the way back to their camps near Al Kharouba area, a car bomb exploded along the highway. Following the explosion, the Egyptian army announced a state of high alert in the areas of Al Arish, Sheikh Zweid and Rafah as helicopters started a search operation above the area. Finally, and back to our local news, under the patronage of the Ministry of Culture, an opera concert and a piano performance were presented at the Opera House in Damascus.
Soothing the pain of the Syrians and finding a way out of the stress, an opera and piano performances were presented at Dar Opera in Damascus. The piano was played by the maestro Ghazwan Zarkli, who is a teacher at the Institute of Music at Dar al-Asad for Culture and Arts. He played some international musical compositions and also some pieces of his own composition.
The classical music entered our country a long time ago, and the Ministry of Culture established a musical school since 1961. So this kind of music is not strange, and our people like to know and to learn everything.
The singer Ghada Harb presented some opera pieces in different languages: German, Italian, Czech and Bulgarian, showing different types of world opera performances.
Performing in such concerts is a message that the culture and arts are the only means to purge our souls and to make us return back to our humanity by rejecting violence.
The audience who filled the opera hall listened solemnly to the performances, yearning to this kind of arts.
With this, we end our news for today. Thank you for watching. For more details about Syria and the region and to view this bulletin again, you can always visit our website in English, syriaonline.sy. Now to latest business and market news with Bani Gunjan, but after a short break. Syrian Arab army units set free our TV crew besieged by terrorists inside their Atiyah hospital in Damascus countryside. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Yarado Krikorian with the news in English. The Syrian Arab army. Syria's permanent UN representative Bashar al-Jaafari stressed that Syria is combating terrorism on behalf of the whole world. A number of soldiers and army officers forced to flee their military service surrender to authorities, taking advantage of Presidential Decree number 70. Was able to lift the siege imposed on the television crew members inside the Atiya hospital in Damascus countryside. Our colleague Jaafari Ahmed, who was among the besieged journalists, said that the terrorists, two of them from Saudi Arabia, infiltrated into the hospital and